So again, my name is Chris Norwood. I'm an audiologist here, a doctor of audiology, and we're so excited to be talking about one of the biggest developments of the year. So this product was launched in the US just earlier this year. It's called the Oticon ZEAL, and I think it's safe to say that it is one of the top or the hottest, hearing aid on the market right now. Really, really cool developments. And so today we're joined by none other than one of the developers from Oticon, Thomas Behrens. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Oticon, as you know, we work with most all the major manufacturers when it comes to hearing aids. Oticon is the oldest. They've been around now 120 years, based out of Denmark. And Thomas Behrens is the head of audiology and director at the Center for Applied Audiology Research at Oticon. He's responsible for clinical research, professional communication, and defining audiology in these new products like the Oticon ZEAL. Prior to this, he spent 10 years at the Oticon Research Center called Eriksholm. Some of his research has included things like signal processing, outcome measures, cognitive hearing, cognition and hearing, and e-health. And Thomas has a master's degree in business administration from the Copenhagen Business School, as well as a master's degree in applied signal processing from Aalborg University. So Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we want to kind of just get some context from you, Thomas, because I know that you have been in this industry for a long time and seen some of the major changes in development and technology. So if you could just kind of set the stage for me and for some of the other patients here, how did we get to this point? I know you had worked on back with spatial separation on the Oticon Open, as well as the first early stages of the if this then that Internet of Things, and even the advent of AI in the hearing aids now. So if you could just kind of set the stage, how did we get to this point in hearing aids?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be in the industry for 28 years now, and sort of witnessed that development that you just talked to. And maybe the first sort of era I'll talk about is signal processing, and how that has really helped hearing aids clean up sounds and to really deal with that number one problem that people with hearing loss are facing, namely hearing well in noisy conditions. And that has really matured. And then about 10 years ago or so, we started really getting some stable connectivity from hearing aids to all sorts of smartphones, PCs, TVs, whatever we surround ourselves with on a daily basis. And then back in 2000, late 2000, we were then the first to introduce onboard AI into hearing aids. And so that has really been the next step in helping hearing aids clean up the sound so it becomes crisp and clear, and really helps remove some of those barriers that you face when you have a hearing loss. So that's been the development up until then. And then the past 5 years or so, things are now sort of gradually starting to come together step by step. Technology is being more integrated and being easier to use, so that it doesn't require a lot of support to connect with phones or other streaming devices, and that the hearing aids will just adapt to changing conditions in daily life and provide the support that you all need.
It's really amazing, just all the technology advents that you have been such a big part of, Thomas, and so cool to just hear for our patients and for all of us to realize how you've been really on the forefront of defining what is hearing technology worldwide. And I know that you guys did a big launch for this new product, Oticon ZEAL, and for those not familiar, this is kind of what it looks like. Comes in a little charger and has a little tiny device right there. All of that's packed into a small little hearing aid. But at the launch in Europe, and then you did one in the US earlier this year, there's just this excitement among audiologists. And why is this such a big deal? Why is the ZEAL the biggest hearing aid now of the year? What have you seen on your side?
Yeah, so it's really been that in order to create a super small device that sits deep in the ear canal with all the functionality that modern consumers need, staying connected, not missing out on the AI signal processing I talked about before, or any other really needed feature or functionality, then we couldn't really get all of that into the ear canal. But now we can with this new device. And really the key that sort of opened up Pandora's box, if you like, was that we used this new encapsulation technology, it's called. It's basically a medical resin. It's also known from pacemakers and other medical devices. And then instead of creating a shell casting that first and then putting the electronics in, we actually first take the hearing aid battery, wrap all the electronics around the hearing aid battery, put that into a mold, and then pour this liquid medical resin over the electronics, and then that hardens and becomes this tiny little black thing you just showed us. And then an individualized ear mold or dome can be put at the end of it, so it sits very well in the ear, supported by that antenna that you could also see, that sort of round hook-like shape that was there, that sort of has a triple purpose. It's the antenna, it's a retention device, so it sits well in the ear. And then finally, it's also sort of a pull-out cord, so it can be used to easily pull it out of the ear again.
Yeah, just to show everyone, there's that very tiny antenna right there, if you can see it. So that's acting as all those three purposes there. And just really amazing that you're able to fit all of that, all the things the patients have been asking for. As an audiologist, it seems like we were always trying to sort of navigate different trade-offs. I want something that's wireless. I want something that's rechargeable, but I don't, maybe for the cosmetics, not wanting something behind the ear. So now being able to imagine that we get all of these features, they're able to be this small, where you could connect to Auracast or to a laptop, to an iPhone, and stream it right into your ear and not have anything behind the ears. I think it's just a big game changer for a lot of patients, and so exciting to see that you're able to pack all of that into such a small device. I'd say I just want to know, I hear that you were mentioning right before the call that there's now been over 58,000 fittings of this device sort of worldwide. What has been the perception from patients so far? What have you been hearing sort of on the industry level?
Yeah, so it has been overwhelmingly positive, because there's sort of been these barriers to starting with hearing aids for many people, and all of a sudden there was this solution that could meet the needs that they were having. So that, I think, has really been just a game changer for our users, really to start with this and start really just enjoying the sounds of their world, and maybe also reclaiming some of those situations they may have shied away from because of the hearing difficulties that they were facing. So overwhelmingly positive, first and foremost. And then secondly, we are also seeing some quite significant changes in the population that is seeking out hearing care. So a tiny bit younger, and even more significantly, a much milder hearing loss. And then you may think, well, are hearing aids really needed for a relatively mild hearing loss? And it's actually the case that research has shown that already with a mild hearing loss, the brain is starting to change, making sense of sound in a different way. So instead of only relying, for instance, on the sound, it also starts relying more on lip reading, and therefore not only auditory parts of the brain, but also visual parts of the brain becomes active. And that's sort of one of the reasons why then the brain is working on overdrive, and then you may start becoming tired. But by adopting hearing aids at an earlier stage in the development of hearing loss, then we can lower that load on the brain, be less tired, and not only understand speech much better, but also have the energy and the cognitive function in the brain preserved, so one can engage and respond and just lean into life as you please.
That's just so important to know. We know in audiology that we don't just hear with our ear, and we hear with our brain, and that critical role the brain plays. And exciting to see that a new product like this, isn't going to hold people back if cosmetics were a concern or something like that. I've noticed that with patients too, that there does tend to be some people who maybe before might not have considered a hearing aid were deciding to go forward with something like the ZEAL. It's just quite interesting, when you think about like glasses, often people don't hesitate to get a pair of glasses, or they might not even have a visual concern, but they like the style or glasses. I personally felt like I wasn't seeing that as much with hearing aids with the previous behind the ear style. But now that people can have better connectivity or hear better at work, it's just really, really cool to see that more people are excited about, managing their hearing abilities. We just had a little question about in the chat about how does this model of the ZEAL differ from older models? How would you sort of explain how this and particularly in terms of like signal processing, are we losing anything by going so small with the device? How is that working out?
Well, actually, quite the contrary, because by introducing this new production technique, we can fit a much bigger battery in the ear, and that allows us to run all the advanced features in the hearing aid in this tiny device. So there's actually no compromise on any functionality or any advanced feature by adopting a device such as the Oticon ZEAL. But then to the other part of the question, how it differs from other existing devices. Then those devices that have existed up until now, that are the tiny canal ones, they have been custom made for each and every ear, whereas this has one fixed shape that fits typically in around 65% of all ears. But then a custom earpiece is chosen to make sure that it sits well in each ear and is adapted to each and every ear that it's fitted on.
Amazing. And I know you've been a big part of just like research in general, just as the industry as a whole. So I was reading about the Bayer project, the Better Hearing Rehabilitation project, which is a group of international clinicians, academics, hearing industry leaders like yourself, who publish peer-reviewed research about evidence-based audiology. And I was just curious, if you could share with our group here just about the role of like AI or a deep neural network in something like the ZEAL. Is that just a buzzword? We're hearing it from so many different manufacturers now. And I have a feeling that's where we're going to continue to see things progressing. But how do you guys research something like that, or what kind of goes into something like AI or deep neural network in a hearing aid?
Yeah, so we've actually got a big research group working just with AI and testing all sorts of ideas on how we can improve hearing using these new technologies. The way AI is currently used is what you may know is that AI is super strong at image recognition or pattern recognition. So what we do in our hearing aids is that the tiny computers that are sitting inside the hearing aid, they create images of sound that the AI can then recognize. And once it recognizes meaningful sound, such as speech or music or something similar, it will preserve that. Whereas if it doesn't see those characteristic patterns or images relating to speech, then it'll sort of classify the sound as noise or less important, and then sort of create a contrast between the speech and the noise, so that there's sort of a natural separation of the two, allowing the brain to focus on that speech sound and not be disturbed by the surrounding sounds. But very importantly, the surrounding sounds are still available so that you don't feel disconnected from your surroundings. So that's sort of been the trade-off and the design that has gone into this, to the Zeal. On the one hand, improving access to speech and the important meaningful sound. On the other hand, creating that separation so that it's easy to be engaged in whatever you find important and interesting, but at the same time you're not disturbed by it, but still connected.
Amazing. And I know another big philosophy of Oticon over the years has been this idea of brain hearing. How does that sort of fit into the Zeal and the way that sort of how Oticon manages sound and how they feel as audiologists, how we should set up the devices for patients?
Yeah. So the way that has come in has been in ensuring that all the features and functionalities that are in the Oticon Zeal lend themselves very well to customization of the device. So following diagnostics and needs assessment, the Zeal can be individualized to a very high degree to whatever's been determined in that initial phase. And then it can be further adapted to the particular, not only hearing loss, but also ear canal it's sitting in. So it's all sort of well crafted for optimal sound quality and optimal experience with the amplified sound.
Amazing. And in terms of what type of patient is best for Zeal, is there a particular type of hearing loss, or can any type of hearing loss use this, or is there a particular person that you would say you were designing it for in intention?
Yeah, so it maybe the main intention with the device was the first time user that is about to start their journey with hearing aids, typically then having mild to moderate, maybe borderline severe hearing loss. So that's been the main group of people. But we're also seeing maybe in that those first 58,000 people that it is a little bit more males than females. It's a 60-40 split. People, as I said, tend to be a little bit younger. And I am aware of quite a number of relatively well-known people globally that have started using the Oticon ZEAL. Most of those being males that that really were looking for something discreet but fully functional, that have now started the Oticon ZEAL as something very attractive.
Amazing. And one other just question about design, the antenna. So that antenna that kind of sits here in the bowl of the ear, I know you were mentioning it's the removal string, also retention, but then it's also the antenna. And that seems like a very just interesting, cool part of the design. How is it that that antenna works? I think I was reading something about it sending the signal, like amplifying it to get it to the phone by the way it touches. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically the body has a lot of water, and that becomes a barrier to the antenna. But here we've created a different design of the antenna that uses the fact that the hearing aid is sitting inside the ear. So the connectivity performance of that antenna is optimized when at least 50% of the length of the antenna is touching the ear. And we have ensured that with the stiffness of that antenna and the material that has been chosen, that will always happen when it sits in the ear. And we've seen this for big ears, but also for very small ears, where the antenna just curls up very nicely.
Wow, that is so cool. That is really cool. I just have to know, how long does it take to research and develop something like this? How do you guys go about doing this? Do you first test it on patients? Sort of what's the design process when you're going to make such a big shift? Like thinking that the ZEAL, for those who don't know, is considered a whole new category of hearing aids. So NXT CIC is the official name, where like the behind the ear is a BTE or a RIC, receiver in the canal. This being an NXT, a whole new line of hearing aids. How do you go about that process? Just curious from the behind the scenes on that.
Yeah, so we started roughly 8 years ago, maturing all the basic technologies. And then 5 years ago, the first early product development started. And then it all accelerated maybe 3.5 years ago, with the very big R&D teams starting to work on this. And then the first sort of significant clinical testing started roughly 2.5 years ago. And then step by step, when we develop a new hearing aid, we add more and more functionality to it and test that it's all working and that it provides the needed benefits. And then we also always test that it works better than its predecessor. So in this case, there was no real predecessor, but we actually tested it up against this custom hearing aid that, yeah, Chris, you call this the next CCC. The previous category was called CIC, and we actually released a CIC device just 6 months before this new one. And when we tested these two up against each other, roughly 90% of all the test participants preferred the new device over the old one. So we were quite impressed with that level of benefit and improvement in just such a short time.
Amazing. There was one question in the chat just about cleaning the device, and just for those who may be familiar with other styles of hearing aids, these, to show you here, the device can have a little dome on the end or a custom mold, like Thomas was mentioning. And then when you remove that dome, there's a little tiny speaker there. So that's that receiver. And for those familiar with Oticon products or any hearing aids, you may have heard of the wax guard. It's that little white piece right there, protects wax from getting inside. And so the device is quite easy to clean. If you're familiar with other styles, you would just take your little filter and, change out that piece, put back on the dome. So very, very similar style when it comes to cleaning. Yeah. So just sort of thinking about the future, I know that you had mentioned you'd been working for 8 years designing this particular product. For somebody like you, I just have to know sort of what gets you excited to get up every day, to keep on researching hearing, and sort of what direction do you think things are going to be headed in the future? Sort of if you were brainstorming, which I know you must do with your work, but I just have to know sort of what keeps you going every day.
Yeah, so it's a very exciting time to work in audiology. That there's so much happening in the world around us in terms of research, discovering how hearing and the brain is really working together. That helps us create new and more precise diagnostics. It helps us create prescription rules to utilize technologies more precisely for any person with hearing loss. And then finally, we've talked about AI, and AI has started emerging. First, we are on the second generation of our AI technology in hearing aid, but some of the stuff we have lined up for the future is super exciting. So we can really continue removing barriers for people like you who face hearing loss. So that's really our big goal. And we are fortunate at Oticon that we are owned by a charitable foundation, the William Demant Foundation. William Demant was our founder back in 1904. And so by having that charitable foundation as the majority shareholder, we can have a long-term focus on creating innovations like Oticon ZEAL that can really help change lives and remove those barriers that hearing loss impose on us all.
Well, amazing. Thank you again so much, Thomas, for all of your insight today. Really, really exciting, to hear from you and to sort of get a behind the scenes look on what it was like to develop a product like the Oticon ZEAL. If anyone here in the call is ever interested in learning more or wants to try the Zeal, feel free to give our office a call or send an email to audiologist@everhear.com. And your audiologist can share more about this exciting new product. Again, I'm not just saying it when I say it really is like the hottest, the biggest hearing aid of this past year. We haven't seen this type of buzz around a device in a long time, and it's exciting. New people are excited to try the device who might not have wanted to try it before in terms of just the cosmetics of the device, but knowing that we're not compromising on sound quality or some of these AI features on the hearing aids, and even great connectivity. So it's so exciting to hear all of that from you today, Thomas. And thank you again, all
Chris,
for attending.
We do have a few questions. It looks like
yes,
Bob has a question.
For sure.
So Bob, do you want to just speak out? You're muted.
Unmute myself like that.
There you go. It's all yours.
All right. The question was, you just show me how you install it in the ear. I'd like to see it if you're in a profile. In other words, looking straight at your face, I can't see what's going on in the ear. How it sits in there, how you adapt it to the right person.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like on the charger for those who haven't seen it before. And so the red is the right side, the blue is the left ear. There's a little magnet kind of on the charger, and the charger case has a little part that closes up when you lift it off the charger. It turns on automatically. This is the red one here, so I know it's for my right ear. Has the little dome on the end, a little microphone here on the back, and a little cable that's that antenna/pull string. So it just kind of goes right into the ear, just like so. And then as I push it in, that little antenna kind of hangs out in the bowl of my ear. So it just kind of blends right in with the skin there. And there's nothing behind the ear. It's all just fully in the ear canal, right there. So the whole device sits in the ear canal. To pull it out, there's just that little pull string, and then it comes out of the ear and can go back on the charger. When you set it back on the charger, it'll start charging automatically. So it turns off and starts charging, and then that's what it looks like.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from anyone?
I'd like to try it.
Yeah. Feel free to, if you're ever interested, just give our office, a call and or shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to find a time for you to come in.
I noticed, Chris, one more question that I think is important, which was whether this device offers a warmer and fuller sound experience, as well as how it handles music, and it's actually been optimized for that as well. So it does offer a more extended range of frequencies, which does give it a warmer and fuller sound quality, and which is very important again for listening to music. And on top of that, it also has special music programs built in, so that you can listen to your favorite music and really enjoy all the details of that music with this optimized listening experience.
I have another question, Ruth.
Yes, Hossein.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I noticed that when Dr. Norwood was showing it, the whole thing that goes into the ear is a little bit too big. For people with TMJ, is it going to create pain? Is it going to be too much pressure on the outer ear?
I would, yeah, great question. I would say from my experience so far fitting the device, I'd say in most cases not. It is quite comfortable, and it's a matter of, finding the right size tip or, a custom piece on the end that sort of fit to your particular ear. So there are some ears that may just be too small, to necessarily fit the device. as Thomas was mentioning, I think around 2/3 of ears, the ZEAL is optimized to be fit for. So it won't be able to fit every ear, but for the vast majority of them, it's usually not an issue, and actually quite comfortable. It's pretty lightweight, surprisingly lightweight in the ear canal. It's not too heavy of a device.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There was another question from Don. Don, did you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, I'm curious about how it amplifies background noise. Oticon hearing aids I currently have tend to amplify the background noise almost to the point of being annoying. Wondering about how these new hearing aids deal with that.
Yeah, so the amplification of background noise can be either customized on the current hearing aids you have, or with the ZEAL, there is quite a number of very detailed customizations that can be created. So we can both customize in which listening environments you need support from your hearing aids, as well as how much support you need in the different listening devices, listening environments, sorry. And that's something our programming software handles specifically for that. So it's possible for Dr. Norwood and others, other clinicians, to customize it to your needs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Deborah or Doug, did you have a question?
Yes. Well, I think you already went through one of them. I have my right ear canal is smaller than the left, so I don't know if it would fit me. Then a second question, like if you can have one customized for that or not. And then the other, not really a question though, the Oticons that I currently have, they have a enhancement for my music. So is this a further enhancement from that?
If we start with the last question, yes, it is a further enhancement from that, because now it is a version of the My Music that now has more low frequency sound, so it becomes warmer and fuller. And then to your second question about one ear being a little bit smaller than the other, we have actually seen the Oticon ZEAL fit very nicely, also in very small ear canals. So it's typically maybe more about the bend of the ear canal rather than the size of the ear canal. So if you feel like this is something for you, I would certainly give it a try.
Okay, and then this is the current one that I have, and it's got this thread that leads into the dome, whereas the other one is kind of hard connected. So I guess I don't know if it has to be tweaked in a certain way for each ear, or
Yeah, it's something where I'd say if if that's something you're interested in, next time you're in clinic, we have some samples in each of our offices, and we could see what it feels like in your particular ears, if that's something you want to kind of see how it fits, and look. The audiologist can help take a look closer at the audiogram and see if that's an appropriate option or not, based off the different hearing levels in each ear. It's something we can see on sort of an individual level.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think the last question is, Bob, did you have a question or did we already answer it? I think we already answered it. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Turn it over to you, Chris.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Thomas, for your time. We appreciate it. We know you have a very busy schedule and that you're out on the road right now. That sounds like talking about the Oticon ZEAL. So we appreciate you taking some time from your busy day to share with our clinic community here. And again, anybody interested in the ZEAL, feel free to let our office know. Our goal is always just to keep all our patients updated on the latest in hearing technology. And this definitely was a big one here for 2026. So again, thank you all for taking the time to learn more about it. And if any other questions come up, or if you want to see, how would it work on more an individual level based off the way your ear is shaped or based off your audiogram configuration and your particular results, that's something that your audiologist can really help see if it would be something that would work for you. So definitely let our office know. And again, thank you all so much for attending today, and hopefully you learned something new. I know even I did, so hopefully everyone did. So thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.